I'm going to call the special meeting to order at 6:52. Let's rise and we'll have Bob Ness lead us in the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so tonight, before we start our presentation, we have some financial matters to take care of. Eileen, who is here with us, is our acting controller, but we need some bank and other approvals that are required in order for her to take over Allison's role, to remove Allison as the signator and move things forward. We are in the process of working with Eileen and Bill Stoll and others, and we are restructuring the finance office somewhat. And we're going to make a few decisions, and then we'll be back to discuss the exact matter that we will utilize to implement the plan. But I'll just say things are running very smoothly, and we have some pretty dramatic improvements already, and we're just going to keep tweaking it until it's perfect. So having said that, and again, we're going to wait until Andreas arrives to start our presentation. But let's go to item 4, Rocky.
Motion of the Board of Mayor and Burgesses about the following resolution as it read.
Second motion.
All right, so for you guys that don't know, as if read means that we don't have to read a lengthy resolution. Well, what it says is that we're going to be appointing Eileen, our acting controller, to be the signator on our financial institution documents. And all of them require 2 signatures, so that either myself, the treasurer, Adam Bronco, or Eileen will have to, 2 of the 3 have to sign the document. So Allison is no longer a signator, and Eileen takes her spot.
Roll call.
Pete, can I ask you one question before we do that?
Yes.
If the lawyers would look this over, I'm not questioning that, but it says acting controller Eileen, pronounce it, removing controller Allison Bruce. That feels like language to me.
No,
Is that the
really.
way it's supposed to? I mean, she's replacing her, she's not removing her.
Well, she resigned, Allison. She doesn't work for us. So this is the bank's motion. This is, we didn't prepare the motion.
Got it.
The
Okay,
bank, the
got
bank.
it.
We're not having her rubbed up.
will remove,
Yeah, right. So, see, I mean, yeah.
we're removing her name.
Got it. Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, roll call vote. Rocky,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Fran,
Yes.
Dorothy,
Yes.
Julie,
Yes.
Kim,
Yes.
Charlie.
Yes.
So on Zoom, we have Mike and Megan. Okay, Mike,
Yes.
Megan,
Yes.
and I'm yes. So it's a unanimous roll call vote. Item 5.
Motion of the Board of Mayor and Burgesses authorize acting controller Eileen A. Pernacchia to be the plan administrator, sponsor, and trustee for equitable retirement. Remove controller Allison W. Bruce as the plan administrator, sponsor, and trustee, effective May 27, 2025, for plan ID 690-189, 690-190, 693-073, 693-074, 693-075, 693-076, 698-551, and 698-552.
Second motion.
All right, so this is the same concept except for our pension plan, so to speak. So it's necessary that we have a signator, and Eileen will take that role. Do we have any questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion passes unanimously. Now, I think what we'll do is, before we start the presentation, because I would like the press to be here, because there's a lot of good information we're going to present tonight. But we do have a handout that people can start looking through. And I'll just give you an overview. I'm gonna take us from where we were to where we are and where we hope we're going, and bring everyone up to speed, talk about the differences, and mainly introduce the two gentlemen who are across the table from me from G&W Railway, Jim Speed and Charles Hunter. They will be talking about G&W and their desires to expand and all types of information about G&W, their business model, and how this works for them and for us. We'll be going through a lot of exhibits. We'll talk about the various people who are working with us. We're going to take a look at the layout as we have it now and the conceptual plan of what the new layout will look like on page 5. We're going to talk about, and Jim and Charles are really the experts here, but the G&W reach, they have really a national reach and the ability to go to Montreal with one straight shot, and of course Canadian National, Canadian Pacific Connect. But I'm going to have them talk about the logistics and the areas they can reach. On the next page, we're going to have G&W explain their rail plan, which includes spurs at the Uniroyal site. And they've already done quite a bit of work, and we'll be talking about the tracks and how they, at least initially, see the site working. At that point, I'm going to turn it over to Mark DePecco. We know Mark is a developer who did the Kind Care project in Naugatuck, and he's been working with us trying to put together some great opportunities. And one of the main differences between this deal and the last deal is that we're not going to be asking the federal government for any money for a variety of reasons, but we are going to need some injection of capital in addition to our TIF funds and state funds. So the concept here is we would be working with Mark to build, so to speak, pay for the spurs. We would work as a unit where the borough of Naugatuck, and I'm going to go through this all again when the press gets here and take questions, but just to give you an overview, we'll be working with the borough to find opportunities. The biggest opportunity will be one we'll most likely do an RFP for, which will be a logistics operator and people who can transload, offload, unload the tracks and create opportunities for any business in the area who doesn't have a site here to take advantage of freight rail. And Mark will talk about that. And we're going to go back to the beginning just for you, Andres. Then we're going to talk about some additional concepts and things that have to be done from a development standpoint. We're going to talk about opportunities, a lot of the benefits to the borough. And when we get toward the end, we'll see the type of uses that we're initially considering. And of course, we'll be taking input from G&W and then at the end, we have next steps. So what I'm gonna do now is formally, that was my opening comments. But I'm gonna formally start the presentation. And what I'd like to do first is to introduce from G&W Railroad, Jim Speed and Charles Hunter. Actually, I knew Charles from our deal with P&M because he was working with G&W. We were actually hopeful that G&W was going to acquire P&M. I think it would have got us to where we are a lot quicker than now. But I've been talking to Charles for a long number of years, and I'm going to start off by saying where we were. All right. Now, I'm going to hold up this map, especially for the people on Zoom, although it is included on page
Page 5.
no, page 6. Page 6 has the P&M map.
Oh, gotcha.
All right. So in our deal in the past with P&M, and by the way, some people in the room know virtually everything I'm going to say, and some people weren't here and don't know what the prior deal was. But it's important to understand it because you'll have a better feel for the differences, and actually why this is better than where we were before. So first of all, this map shows that P&M basically covered a large portion of New England and going up into eastern Canada. And everything that you see on this map in blue was owned 100% by P&M Railroad. What you see in red was owned by P&M Railroad and Norfolk and Southern. So we know we had a deal with P&M, and we were moving forward, making a lot of progress, and getting very excited about implementing a freight rail deal. When P&M decided to sell the railway, there were 7 bidders, including CSX, the ultimate winner, G&W, and several other large railroads. But CSX purchased the line, and when they did that, they decided they had no immediate interest in the Naugatuck site. So what happened is that there was some controversy over this among the various railroads. And in the United States, we have a body called the Surface Transportation Board that sits these things out and has to approve a merger. So the CSX P&M merger had to be approved by the federal government. And that was a long process that went on for several years. And of course, it was during COVID, and there were a lot of things happening. But the long and the short of it is that during that process, the federal government decided that the fairest thing to do was for the red area on this map, which was owned half by P&M and then CSX and half by Norfolk and Southern. To be fair, there has to be a neutral operator and someone in charge of that line who is not CSX or Norfolk Southern. So the Surface Transportation Board selected G&W, and again, G&W is a very, very large entity, and they'll talk about that. And G&W created a subsidiary company which is owned fully by G&W called Berkshire and Eastern. And the long and the short of it is, and when they talk about what they're controlling now, it includes the area in red. which is now controlled by G&W, B&E, together with all the other lines that they are connected with, including two lines that go and connect to Canadian National and Canadian Pacific. So in my view, going up, a more central part of the United States than heading up to Maine and the Northeast creates more opportunities. Now, the other really major point that they're going to touch on is that when we were working with CSX, we were going to be working with containers. So heavier, trains requires a more expensive infrastructure. So in the deal we're working on now, it will not be containers. It'll be, I'll call them rail cars, freight rail, sort of like the old days. Now remember, the freight rail system in the United States, it's intact. It's there. It, hasn't been utilized to its fullest. It used to be at the site. Uniroyal Chemical in the 50s had freight rail. There are old spurs. Some of them are still there. A lot of them are still there, and some of them aren't. So what we're really doing is going to be cheaper because the infrastructure doesn't cost as much when you don't have containers. We don't need the federal government. We're going to be able to cover a wider territory going up the center of the country, and it's just a lot of pluses to working with G&W. So I think this is probably a good time for me to have Jim and Charles talk to us about G&W, your company, your thoughts for why this works, your interest, and what you plan to do, and also to give some examples of the type of businesses that could utilize and benefit from freight rail in this region. So I don't know who wants to start, Jim or Charles, but why don't you guys speak on behalf of G&W?
Sure. Thanks for having us. We appreciate it. We're excited about this project. Been out to the site to see it, and we think it has a great future. So I'm Charles Hunter. I'm AVP Government Affairs for corporate Genesee and Wyoming. I cover 13 states from Maine to Wisconsin. I live in St. Albans, Vermont. So this was a pretty easy commute other than traffic for me today. So I work with anywhere from municipalities to the federal government. I work on legislation, I work on projects, I work on grants. I do a lot with Connecticut DOT on the grant side. We just completed a pretty significant tie project with CONDOT on this line down to Waterbury just a couple of months ago. Also did some crossing work. Line is in pretty rough shape. I railed it before we took over, and it needed a lot of love. I'll say that. So we got that completed. Pan-Am Southern was also a recipient of a federal Christie grant a couple of months ago. That work will probably start next year. We'll find materials probably this year, but that'll put tracks back in service at Waterbury Yard so that we have capacity to serve customers down here in Connecticut, interchange with the Kentucky Railroad. So we're excited about that project. G&W has been around a long time. It actually started in 1899 in the counties of Genesee and Wyoming, New York. So that's where it gets its original name. Started to serve a salt mine. And today we still serve that same salt mine. We just celebrated our 125th anniversary last year, and they ran a special train from Rochester down to Red Sox to that salt mine. So we've been at it a long time. In the 1980s, when the federal government deregulated the railroad industry, that's when short lines and regional railroads really started to grow. Genesee and Wyoming became the holding company of these smaller railroads. And today, we operate over 100 of these railroads, mainly in the U.S. and Canada. But we also have a pretty significant operation in the United Kingdom and the Netherlands. Had a large railroad in Australia, which was sold 5 years ago. So pretty much North America based. Our headquarters is actually out here in Darien, Connecticut, and oversees the whole system. Safety is a huge priority of this company. We are the safest operator of shoreline and regional railroads. That was something that we really wanted to emphasize when we took over this railroad, Pan Am Southern, get the culture in place to operate safely. There's been a lot of derailments down here in Connecticut over the years. You've probably seen it in the news. So that project we did with Condot, along with other projects we've done ourselves, been able to get the incidents reduced. And that's our goal, is to operate a safe railroad. Did a great job talking about the B&E and how it's structured. So I like to attribute it to kind of having 3 masters on this railroad. It's different than any railroad that we have. We don't own it, we don't lease it, we operate it on a long-term basis. So CSX and NS actually own the property. Pan Am Southern is the actual railroad. So we're a contract operator. So we have to keep the owners happy, and we have to keep our own company happy. So it's an interesting partnership. And, we've come a long ways in the 2 years that we've been operating the railroad. CSX and NS, I think I can say that we're happy with us as the operator. Grow the business on this railroad. That's the future. And we'll talk a little bit more about that.
Jim Speed, I'm the Director of Sales and Marketing, work for the Pan Am Southern. Just want to piggyback on just a couple of things that Charles mentioned. The importance of safety. So far this year, we are 0 safety incidents. So that's something we're particularly proud of. A continual focus of our railroad. Then the other thing that I just want to mention is talking about capital for the entire railroad, in addition to the grants that we've been able to get from various sources. Our budget for this year is looking at $12 million of capital investment from the Pan Am Southern into the plant. A property that needed some tender loving care. We've seen a lot of improvements in the short time that we've done on property, and it's just going to continue getting better. What I love about this particular project, the timing is perfect, and the location is perfect. And I'll tell you just a little bit about my background, because I think it shed some light on why I personally am so excited about the project. So I've only been with the Burgesses or the Pan Am Southern since October of 2023. Prior to this job, I was in sales and marketing for the Canadian Pacific. Prior to that, I was in sales and marketing for the main properties, which initially was the Bangor Railroad, the Montreal Main Atlantic Railroad, and Thunder Main and Quebec Railroad. And in all of those stops, excuse me, I could have seen a need for exactly what you guys are trying to do down here. Just for an example, many of my customers, when I was up in Maine, the Bangor Railroad, those other properties, we served paper mills, lumber mills, pulp mills. All of those types of companies were always looking for a way to get into this market by rail. Just truck rates out of Maine are horrible. Rail brings so many other benefits over and above truck. Depending on the type of product and its density and volume, it's anywhere from 2.5 trucks to 4.5 trucks per rail car. So you can picture the types of savings that you get coming out of northern Maine coming down to here. And to me, what makes this project so exciting is I see this serving a really nice market niche that, in my own experience dealing with my own the customers that I've had, I can see a need for. you know, in the same thing from my time at CP. You know, there's a tremendous amount of, just using one example, there's a tremendous amount of Canadian sourced propane that comes down into this market. You know, and I think this place is perfectly positioned for that type of industry to, you know, bring in propane by rail and then disperse it to homes and companies. As far as timing goes, so we started operation for the Pan Am Southern in September of 2023. And our operating plan called for 90 conductors and engineers, which need to move a train. And when we started, CSXT basically only gave us 68, and 4 of those were on long-term medical. So, you know, we started off, you know, with only basically 2/3 of the headcount we needed to operate the plan that we had in place. So that particularly that first, let's say 3 months, it was a struggle. You know, we weren't providing the service that is up to G&W standard. And it takes a long lead time to train and get qualified conductors and engineers to operate on it. So I'm going to say for the first year and a half, and maybe even some going into this year, we weren't looking for external growth. We had so much growth to manage on our existing footprint. Felt like our first obligation was to, you know, the customers that we currently serve, you know, before we start trying to bring on, you know, more business. So for 2025, you know, budget-wise, there wasn't very much in there for external growth. But for 2026, we really feel like we got this, we built a better mousetrap. We have online customers that are happy. And now is the perfect time for us to expand the footprint. And our current operation ends at Waterbury. We connect with the Metro North. Currently, we have no customers south of that, but we have not just this project, but numerous others where we're trying to open up service to that line. And, you know, kind of like I always use the mall analogy. You know, you need your big department store to, you know, to anchor the business, and then you can sell all the little shops. Well, we have other businesses ready to go, but just unfortunately, those aren't of this project size, and it can't justify the resources that we would need to put into it to be able to service those customers. But with this project, and if you think about the Metro North line that goes from Waterbury down to Ansonia, you know, we would love to be able to go all the way to Ansonia, but this gets us halfway there with, you know, an anchor tenant that can justify us being able to serve not only you, but other customers along the line. And to demonstrate, you know, our commitment, again, just budgetary speaking, we had put 2 additional bodies down here in Waterbury, plus an additional leased locomotive, just to service this line, you know, south of Waterbury, plus we connected to Naugatuck right there in Waterbury, plus we have a couple propane customers there. That, you know, I was happy to see our management, you know, put their money where my mouth is and allocate the resources down here so that we can grow this business. The other thing that I really like, and you touched on this, why I think this is a better project now, even than when it was being talked about with CSXT, is it kind of comes back to the way our railroad is set up corporately. So remember how we talked about having the 3 masters, so to speak, but commercially, I'm not allowed to, as part of my STB mandate, I'm not allowed to favor NS. I'm not allowed to favor CSXT, and I'm not even allowed to favor Genesee Wyoming. There's a hard wall commercially between me and those other entities, and my job is to grow this business as if it was an independent entity, to the best of our ability. So what's great about that is, let's just say that you had a class one, using CSXT as an example, and there was a piece of business that worked perfectly for this park, but CSXT either didn't serve the origin or destination or had a competing interest somewhere else, then maybe that they wouldn't have been interested in the project. For us now, and what's so unique about this Pan Am Southern property and the access that we have, so we have 4 class 1 connections. Class 1 is just one of the larger railroads. We connect with CSXT on the eastern end of our line in Air Mass. So we have that gateway to help you serve New Hampshire, Maine, the Canadian Maritimes. Tremendous amount of product that originates in St. John, New Brunswick, for instance. It's always been very hard for rail to compete with because you're competing with the I-95 corridor. So we have that gateway that serves and help you or your customers access that whole geographic region. As he mentioned, going north, we connect with either the VTR or the NECR, which then connect directly with the 2 Canadian railroads, the Canadian Pacific and the Canadian National outside Montreal. Then on the western end of our railroad, Canterville, New York, we connect directly with CP, connect directly with CSX, and then we also have another interchange with CSX here, there in Rotterdam Junction that opens up everything going west, so west and south. And then on top of those, and if I'm going too long, stop me.
Jim, let me just keep it simple and go back to what they already know. So the first area he mentioned going up into Maine is what we had before. That's the blue area here, which was what Pan Am had and where we were focused. So what Jim is saying is that we have that, so we can use that. But in addition to that, we can go up the center of the map in the red area, heading all the way to Montreal, two different ways. He's got 2 different routes in the middle to get to basically Canada, Montreal, Canadian National. And over here on the far western part of the Pan Am Southern line, they have a direct connection with Canadian Pacific. Now, Canadian Pacific and Canadian National are massive. I mean, the potential opportunities are crazy. They cover the whole country of Canada. So it's a much better, in my way of thinking, I think they're saying the same thing, opportunity. It's a much bigger opportunity.
They also go to New Orleans and Texas and Mexico.
Yeah, I'm gonna take that train to New Orleans someday. Hold on, Bob.
2 questions. Have you met your goal of the 90+ conductors and engineers?
Yes, actually, coming back to the way this company is formed and reported, every month we report to what's called the JOC, Joint Operating Committee. We report to the NS and CSXT. We just had our meeting a week ago Friday, and we were at our 90 head count for that meeting. I think we had 2 people out at an outlet, but for all intents and purposes, yes.
And you have a term agreement, does G&W have a term agreement with CSX as an operator?
We have an agreement with CSX and NS.
Okay. And is that a long term?
It is long term.
Okay.
That's controlled by the Surface Transportation Board?
Well, it was approved by the Surface Transportation.
And then I was just going to say, in addition to those class 1 connections, those connections to the larger railroads, we also have 7 other short line connections, which again, it's just so unique to this property. We connect with 2 other G&W properties, the NECR and the P&W, but then we also connect with the VTR, which is all Vermont, and gives us that gateway to Canada. We have a couple where, we have a short line connected with it. Or, there's a bunch of feed, grains and fertilizers. We connect the Naugatuck there, Waterbury. So to me, this property has so much to sell. And I can envision a lot of different types of businesses being drawn to the location. Just in the rail industry, the thing you always want most is options. Because if as a sales and marketing guy, if I know you only have one choice and it's me, I got to rate for that. And so it's so much easier when, you know, if I'm trying to put together an outbound move of widgets and I have 5 different ways of getting you to the destination. You know, I have 5 different rates I put together, and you know, I'm a free market guy. Competition is great. You're gonna have a lot of that here, just because you'll have so many different ways of getting the property.
Okay, I want to make 2 more points before I turn it over to Mark. So could we go to slide 3, please? Okay, so could you pull it up a little? So this is sort of just a big picture on the public-private partnership. So the borough, you know, at the end of the day, we are going to control the site and have final say on what uses. So if there's something, you know, we don't want that here, then it won't be here. But in essence, we're going to be intimately involved. We are going to do what we're already doing. We're committing to build the road and you know what we were going to do before. So we're going to basically build an industrial park with a pad site. We're going to continue, don't forget, with phase 1. Phase 1 is underway. So the upper level, we're continuing with that right now. When we talk about the lower level, we're going to be involved in every aspect and approving every use. The railroad, I mean, basically, they're going to run the railroad and they're going to take care of the main track. So when they talk about things in Waterbury and improvements to the rail, that's the role of G&W, and to operate the track to help us find customers. There's 2 more roles now. The developer role, which will be Mark, he's going to fund the engineering that we have to do to change. It's going to pay for the site work and the rail lines for the spurs and work with us to find businesses for users and work with G&W along the same lines. And also, he'll be working with us to procure through an RFP someone to run, I'm going to call it a big warehouse, or you know, the cold storage, a place for any business in the area to use and take advantage of freight rail, and either the same or a separate company to do the onloading and the offloading. So, so we really have 4 entities here. Initially, we have the borough, the railroad, and the developer role, and then we'll be adding to that ultimately the operator of the big site. And we have time. It's not like, you know, I don't think we want to, at least in my mind, I don't want to rush and make deals. We're going to make enough deals initially to make it viable and to get going and get started, and then just keep improving and maximizing everything as we go. And the only other point I want to make before I let Mark take over is if we go to slide 5, if you look at the top, this is a layout that we've already approved, and we've gone through the subdivision process, and this is the approved plan. The main thing we're going to do is we're gonna have to redesign the lower portion of the site. That will be paid for by the developer, and he'll be working with Dymar, Mark Lancor, who's here. Civil One will still be involved with us. But we're basically gonna take the road that the sludge trucks go over now, and instead of hugging it along the rail line, we're gonna move it back up against the ridge so that the businesses can have frontage on the rail spurs without having to cross the road. So that's the simple way to say it. There's a lot of moving parts to that, but that's really the main thing that has to be done. I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Mark. And I've gotten to know Mark well, working on the kind care deal, and we started talking about this some time ago. It really piqued his interest, and he's been working with us, trying to like just get this off the ground and get started. It's developed a relationship with GNW, and we've been all talking, trying to get it to the point where we could say, hey, look, this is where we want to go, and we think it makes a lot of sense, and then we'll proceed. So in any event, I'm going to turn it over now to Mark DePecco.
Thanks, Pete, and thank you, council members. A lot of you know me as a developer of the Kind Care project. Excuse me. You're in Naugatuck. I want to back up a little because and give it more context, because you've been living with this project now for a long time.
6 years, at least.
6 years. And I'm kind of new in town, and I want to give you my perspective as a developer. But I have to go back a little because I have a history in the valley. I grew up in Bob Neff, grew up in Thomas. In fact, Bob knows my family really well. And we go back to the 1800s. And
You're that old.
I didn't know you were that old.
Yeah.
You can do that.
My family goes back to the 1800s, and they all worked at the clock factory, and in our town it was a clock factory. Thomas clocks. Naugatuck, it was Uniroyal. And everybody in the valley had these big factories that their relatives worked at. And that's how we grew up, and centered around that. And then I think it was 1973, the year I graduated high school. I think almost 100% of products were made in the U.S. I'm pretty sure it was almost 100%. And from that point on, when Nixon and Kissinger opened up China, it just went downhill, because when you can pay 10 cents an hour, to labor, you're going to want to build your stuff over there, produce your stuff over there. So what we've seen is a hollowing out of the valley since that time, like 50 years. And so when I grew up, my family had a heavy construction company, and I just continued that. So we had a union company that did roads, bridges, pipelines, pumping stations, with sand and gravel, asphalt, kind of like a mini O&G. So I just kept going with the development. And I remember back, I'm not sure what year it was, we got called down to bid a job for Uniroyal. And it had to be what, late 70s? I forget when they went out of business. But we went down there and they wanted to put a siphon under the river. I forget if it was a sewer or water siphon. And the engineer brought us down there, explained the job. And he says, hey, I'll never forget this. He said, the pH in this river is worse than pure Coca-Cola. That's how bad the river was. And we knew growing up, right, Bob? You don't go down to the river. You stay away from the river. So since that time, now you can go over here pretty much any day and Beaton, the city of Borough of Naugatuck has redeveloped this area over where the skateboard park is. People are fishing in the river. Now you can fish in the river. And the other thing that Beaton, the borough's responsible for is taking down Uniroyal. I remember growing up, here we go with the stories, but when you drove down Route 8, you had to close your windows in the 60s because you couldn't stand the smell from Uniroyal. I guess it was rubber. But I mean, this Naugatuck had its share of problems. When the river, Uniroyal that was hollowed out, went out of business. And fast forward, I've been a developer for 45 years. I've done everything. And in the last 10 years, one of our divisions has been senior housing because of the aging baby boomers. And we've been rolling out an assisted living product called Kind Care. We did one in Bristol, and then we're looking for another place in this area. And we're looking at Watertown and the outskirts, Middlebury, this and that. And I looked at Naugatuck and I said, you know, let me revisit Naugatuck. And I went down here and I'm like, what the heck happened to Naugatuck? It's like transformed itself. I couldn't believe it. Cranes in the air everywhere, but Uniroyal was gone, and the river was beautiful, and things were being done, apartments being built, and everything being done. But, you know, we had to look at this, so I was able to buy a property or a couple properties, 5 or 6 actually. Right along Route 8, because that's a major thoroughfare to Naugatuck, and you want people to see the assisted living. It's kind of like a hotel. And I said, we ought to locate here. And then I met Pete, and and the Planning and Zoning Commission, and I couldn't believe like the red carpet that was rolled out. Mark Langford is my engineer from Daimler, and we've been everywhere. 45 years, we've been everywhere. There's only, you know, you can count on one hand, maybe, the towns that have the proactiveness and the receptiveness and the friendliness, politeness, and professionality that you want to get as a developer. I mean, it really feels good. And I thank you again for that. But we were welcomed here, and it made our life a lot easier. So I've come to know Pete and, you know, everybody else in the town, and as you know, developing the Kind Care, the more I got to know Pete, the more I realized that his vision, which was what I saw originally, he's like halfway through it because it's like a 20-year plan. If you look at what he's got going on, and it's like, this is the vision that every government official should have in the valley. And we talked about it. It says, you know what? In the 1800s, they had to be doing really well here in the valley. You know, you look at the city hall in Waterbury, it's not built out of marble. I mean, you know, everyone was doing well, right? And in our lifetime, it went down to nothing. And now people like Pete and this council are bringing it back, right? So I'm thinking, hey, you know, we're Valley boys. Why don't we let's bring the Valley back? I mean, you're doing it here, but I'm thinking, let's do it from, you know, Torrington all the way down to Ansonia. And this rail is like the key to it, one of the keys to it all. I mean, yeah, they cleaned up the river, okay, that's big. But having a rail come through your town is like having I-95. You know, people don't realize rail's kind of hidden from the average person. see a train go by every now and then, you're out of sight, out of mind, it goes, it comes and it goes. But if you look at a rail map, just Google rail maps in New England, you're gonna see they're littered all over the place because this is the way basically everything moved in the 1800s and on. The whole country is littered with black railroad lines, okay? And it's like what Jim was saying, if we had the I-95, the G&W coming through this, we have access to all the domestic and even international up into Canada product. And now with all these tariffs happening and everything, you know, it's like buy American, tariffs on foreign goods, that just makes it stronger. You could have a business here getting domestic supply because this is what this is. The rail is domestic supply. Like Charles said, you could get stuff from Texas. You know, I mean, when you think about it, this can be like a real big bonanza. We're taking advantage of it. So anyway, I latched on to Pete's pitch about his vision, and I'm like, I'm all in. I love this stuff. This is right up my alley. You know, working with dirt, heavy construction, railroads, roads, you know, developing properties, and so we started to get into this thing, and you know, Mark Lancourt, my engineer, started looking at this, and after talking to G&W and seeing the plans that you had before with the vision of the port and containers, big containers coming in, with Jim's and Charles' advice, we're like, you know, that a better option would be to take advantage of the short lines and not go with containers and go with what we have right now. Because we could do that right now. When you stack two containers on top, it may not fit through a bridge up in Berlin or something because it's too high. But with G&W, with the short line, those are normal rail cars. We can do it right away. We have the infrastructure and there's nothing stopping us. Yeah, there has to be a little love and attention to the main line, and then we have to build the spurs into each lot. That's all part of the program. But we looked at this and we said to make it more actionable right now, if we move the road, what was planned was that the access road where the trucks come out right alongside the rail. If we move that up west, closer to the bottom of the slope, we call the toe of the slope, that'll free up the real estate from the rail to the road. So you really, can I use your mouse a second? Yeah, so you really, see right here, this is the area we're freeing up. You see it? Because the rail line is in purple, and the new road we're proposing is up here, this black line. Whereas before, the road was right along the rail. So by moving it up here, we freed up all this space for businesses. Number two, we've designed a loop road around the big warehouse, which crosses the rail. There's a crossing. And that's important to give this value, because you can never have a real distribution facility with trucks coming in and out without a loop road. Even from a fire standpoint, the fire marshal never allow that. Something happens, so you need a crossing. So these are all the improvements that we have to make in addition to the rail spurs and everything. There's going to be a lot of dirt moving, a lot of site preparation just with any development. But we're prepared and ready to handle that. So I've spent my whole life in this kind of construction business. I'm really excited about it. I also have on my team Jack Bukowski. Many of you might know Jack was former vice chairman of the Public Utility Regulatory. He retired. And he's now on our team, so he's gonna help with a lot of the governmental regulations. Pete, of course, is the chair of the North Dakota Valley Council of Governments, which is huge help too. Pete has already greased the wheel with the DOT. By the way, my company, we did enormous amount of work with DOT, with municipalities, we have bonding capabilities, all kinds of stuff. So we're very comfortable in this world. Dymar Engineering, our engineer, we work together all the time. Mark did all the engineering down at Kind Care and all other projects. And then, of course, the railroad. So we have a real dynamite team. We're really looking forward to doing this. I talked about the enhancements, which are the loop road. We're actually going to create more real estate, more lots that are available. You go to slide 11.
Oh, you have a little mouse there.
Good. This is the slide 11 shows the same day round trip for trucks from the Naugatuck site. And basically, it's got a pretty significant reach. So in other words, you could get to anywhere in that circle and back of it in one day. So from truck traffic, it's a very, very convenient site. We go to slide 12. The advantages for businesses to come here are, number one, with the direct rail access. They can get goods from, like what Jim was saying, product just about anywhere can be delivered directly to the business. Number two, we've got a domestic supply chain, which will be advantageous to a lot of businesses. Number three is our strategic location, which is further south than most businesses that have rail in Connecticut. By the way, you guys, Jim and Charles, is the line that is used for Metro North that goes through Fairfield County, is that accessed by any freight rail?
So our Providence and Worcester Railroad runs down the northeast border, but we only have rights for aggregate speed. We don't have rights for any general freight. CSX has the general freight rights on the northeast.
So they can run down the Metro North?
Out of they have a yard in New Haven.
Only
That's
in
how
New
we
Haven.
serve the border. They have a yard in Westport.
And where?
Westport.
Let's also remember that in a way CSX is a partner, right? They're connected with
Yes.
us and they benefit from you doing well. So they're part of the team.
So as Jim was saying, lower transportation costs because a rail car will generally take about 4 truckloads. So if you're hauling salt from Albany with 4 trucks versus doing it with 1 rail car, gives you an idea of the opportunity for businesses.
And I would think the states, the DOT is saying, we're gonna get all these trucks off our roads, less wear and tear, less traffic, it's solving the work problem.
Yes.
Exactly.
Hopefully they'll throw money at it because.
We've got a good labor pool up here, and it will be development ready. It's not going to take much. Jim talked about getting the workers permitted by August. Is that correct?
Yeah, so, we'll have a train crew assigned to this location in August of this year.
Sure.
And then they'll have to go for this training, those types of things, to come south of Waterbury. Gonna get it approved to go on a line that get trained on its particular characteristics. So the head count and locomotive will not be anything that holds us ready. We'll be ready
So while they're doing that, Dymar and us will be putting together a road design for the new road and getting that approved through the planning and zoning commission. You figure what that'll take about 8 months or so. And after that, we'll be talking in spring of next year, we'll be ready for. They have to shut down the tracks to put in some of the spurs. It's conveniently, the borough of Naugatuck has to shut down the tracks for
Train
new,
station.
new train station.
So the plan,
So we could do it at the same time.
right, that's the plan.
So it works out pretty well. So that's the basic timeline. And then if you go to the slide 14, some of the potential uses, the big warehouse we have shown on the east side of the track is about 200,000 square feet, but it can have 2 levels, or it can go higher. So, I mean, and the footprint can be expanded too. So you're talking a pretty massive structure there. And we showed when we designed the, how do I go back?
We got it. The concept plan. There it is. When we designed the warehouse site for the rail, you can see we actually put the rail right through the building. Runs right through the building. This is a long, there's going to be a lot of track here. And at the end of the day, a business might come in and say, you know what, we don't want it through the building, we want it on the side or whatever. So it'll go through changes. But we're looking at a substantial, like Pete said, like cold storage, perhaps. It could be a big cold, Americold, or it could be a huge something like that, or it could be a logistics distribution center that serves other businesses. This is a very valuable location for this type of warehousing. So let's just say that portion of the site that we used to call phase 3. Is the biggest part where we will, that's the most important part.
Is that like 40 acres over there?
Yeah.
And then if you go back to slide 14, other types of businesses, potential, it could be there's many more. Transloading is where you take, for instance, maybe steel, maybe rebar or something off the rail, and then you put it on a truck and you transport it to someone that supplies that to contractors.
Yeah.
But they're not at the site.
Right.
So, but you give them the ability to take those products and savings. Lumber distribution, that's kind of a no-brainer. Aggregates are big savings. Those are bulk goods that come from New York State at a much lower rate than being trucked in. Jim had mentioned bulk propane from Canada. And that could service all of the other propane suppliers in the area. They come in and they get fed off those tanks. And then recycling is, always a very popular way to take care of contaminated soils, other products and have them railed out of state.
Question for you on what you just said, the potential soil transfer station. You're talking about a system where we're bringing in contaminated soil and recycling.
So like we had, when we were digging at Time Care over on 491 North, there's pretty much dirty soil everywhere, which we couldn't take that soil and dump it in your backyard because it had a certain amount of contaminants. So we had to get it hauled all the way over to Mansfield at $110 a ton. And it's really, yeah, it's contaminated. You can't grow flowers in it. But it's all over the place. Anywhere you look, parking lot or whatever, it's contaminated, it's considered contaminated soil. So these contractors would bring in the soil into an enclosed building, and it gets loaded into rail cars, all security and everything, and then it goes out. It goes out to Ohio or Michigan,
Yeah.
into a landfill that takes it. But there's nothing done, you won't even see it. It's the soil comes in, and then the contractor like us, who are building over here, has this dirty soil. We unload it in the building, and then now we have an empty truck. We go back with a load of gravel, virgin gravel, back to the job site. It's perfect. It's a perfect.
The first option is we're going to be, bringing recyclable soil into the area. But this, you're saying this would be, if it is only potentially, who knows? We're taking it out of the
Not found.
In other words, this would be if, like I said, it's potential, but if we're talking about soil recycle area, it wouldn't be like bringing stuff in from out of state and recycling it here and then sending it out.
Not from out of state, it could come from in-state.
That's what I'm saying, so it'll be from here,
Yeah,
which makes a big, as far as I'm concerned.
so the company that comes very close to filling the bill is the one we're working with right here, Red Technologies. They have that exact business on a freight rail line in Portland, Connecticut. And they are a great company. And I would hope that if the borough board approved that use, that they would be interested. Because we've worked with them, I think 4 times since I've been there, and they are a great company. And by the way, they just got bought out by Reworld, and Reworld was Covanta. I mean, they're huge, but they're going to let the people run it. So I would just hope that they would, if we go that way, that they would be interested. I think the most exciting part to me of this is that there's so many businesses and there's such a large territory that could be covered that my biggest fear would be making decisions too soon and overlooking something bigger and better. So I'm all for going slow.
What safeguards are in place to make sure that the river stays clean and it doesn't get contaminated?
Well, that everything has to be approved by DEEP, but the way the site is designed now, there's a large bridge there. It's the only thing that gets into the water is the pipes that go into the water that are regulated by DEEP.
Is there anything different than originally discussed with the electrical supply?
Say that again?
Electrical supply, there won't be a problem.
No, but I mean, there's all the electrical supply issue. We'll solve it with fuel cells
Right.
for this site.
But the original plan is still the same, as
Right,
that
but-
many, and
But I mean, my plan is to develop a lot more than this in Naugatuck. So that, I'm going to say in the future, that'll become an issue.
Now, does each individual business offload alongside and take their product in, or is there a separate company that offloads the trains? The product from the train alongside, and then the business picks it up.
generally speaking, railroad employees don't touch blading. So let's just use a lumber reload as an example. We would place a center beam, it's a 70-foot long rail car that you can unload pallets of lumber from each side. We would place it on a customer siding, and then their staff, their forklifts would unload the product and then release the car back to us.
So then it is the railroad company that moves the product alongside. And then the business comes together.
So there's a lot of potential here for Naugatuck. And I think where you were going at is, that's for lumber, which would probably be on the site, business would be on the site. But the transloading would be a separate company that would unload, say, rebar or pellets, plastic, resin, or whatever a company needs a couple miles away. But they could take advantage of the rail, and then it gets trucked over to there. So that separate company would unload it, put it on the truck, and bring it over there. That's a transloader.
Kim had a question.
Thanks. I've kind of heard things about planning and how you plan and what it looks like in the future. And of course, there's a lot of potential, and all of us could imagine that, and that's very exciting. What do you use as your vehicle timeline or guideline for growth, and what say would we have in that? Because what I've seen in big projects, the worst thing that can happen is some improper planning. Somebody goes off, sees a squirrel, says this is going to be great, and if it doesn't work out, now it impacts things over here.
This is 100% your project from the standpoint of all that type of planning. They're a railroad with it's called common carrier obligations. We will serve whatever type of industry you guys find the best use for your site. So no, we would love to help and have input of, hey Mark, I get a call from a lumber company that's I can provide leads and stuff like that, but we don't have the ability to force you to do.
So just, Kim, let me just
Conversely,
say
you have
that,
to come to us and we have to approve it. That's what I'm asking.
yes, so the borough is gonna have the final say on every use. That's,
That's the question I'm asking.
yeah,
Oh,
number one. Yeah.
Yep.
Just that simple.
So it's much like the other areas where we know what we want or don't want.
Yeah.
So if we don't want it, it doesn't come.
Exactly.
So we'll be, bringing businesses to the table and saying, hey, is this something that you're interested in? Well, how many people is it going to employ? How much is the property tax? What's the deal? Is it good for the town? It's totally in your control. And then you say, yeah. And then we have to prepare a site plan, just like you would for a house in the subdivision. You got to prepare setbacks and figure out how the rail's going to get there and the trucking. We do all that. That's a function we serve. And build it, and you have your business. Yeah.
So we're gonna, we'll take more questions, but, we're gonna discuss this in executive session.
Okay,
So,
sure.
So the final steps for our part in this public-private partnership is to secure an agreement with us. We are going to be getting letters of interest from various businesses. And they don't have to be contracts, but we need to show interest from businesses. For instance, like Tony Lumber. Okay. Because the DOT needs to see that. We're talking with DOT Rail Division, who's interacting with GW. The DOT has a big role in this, and they don't want to go to all this effort if it's pie in the sky. So we need to show interest. They want to know it's real.
so we need 3 letters of intent.
3 letters of intent, we're interested, blah, blah, blah. And then G&W needs to reestablish their big rail permit. And then we can get going on engineering the roadway going through the subdivision, which tweaks it to make it more conducive to this whole. Then we construct it. In business.
I think that the demand will be there because we are premier location in the valley for this project. Simple as that.
You don't foresee any growth bumps with zoning, do you?
No,
No, but
No, a couple of concerns I have, since it's so early, this is one to talk about. Obviously, we have a lot of neighborhoods really close to the area. Family houses, stuff,
so they're not close to this. They're close to the upper part.
the upper part. So we're planning on moving the roads closer. It's gonna increase more traffic in their backyards,
No,
basically,
the
or
roads are below the ridge.
Could you just let me know what's like?
it won't be affecting their quality of life.
Their quality of life is impacted only by what's on the upper tier.
And the other concern is the peripheral infrastructure of access to the highways. Now, this looks fine in this area where the old chemical plant used to be and everything. Getting to the highways where you're gonna wanna have those trucks going, is there gonna be any major changes in
Yes.
development? They're gonna have to
I don't know
make
if
that
it's
happen.
major, but what's gonna happen is the trucks come off Route 8, they come over the bridge, they take a right on Scott Street, and they take a right into the industrial park. So very few properties are impacted, but the specific answer to your question is that, yes, there will be improvements that will have to be made to that Scott Street area from a turning standpoint. So those are costs that will have to be factored into the deal, and that's where it would be on Scott Street.
So when the lights are in operation, yeah.
Maybe they give me that island you've been asking me. to do.
I've been asking them to remove that island for years.
It's just a concern, because, I've walked that area, it's kind of narrow, it's a narrow road, it's gonna need some stretching. If we're gonna be as busy as we hope to be.
No, Scott Street will be impacted.
People are complaining now sometimes when trucks run over the corner.
Yeah.
Those are two problems you're never gonna fix. Never gonna make better drivers, never make people park more efficiently.
I don't want to let Charles and Jim go if there's any more questions.
I have questions, but it's more for later down.
Okay.
This is the big picture, I got little questions.
This is the current, we have to wait.
Try it on a nap.
I have to say, speaking for Charles, we can come back. I mean, yeah, this isn't a one and done. As this gets moving forward and you start narrowing down to, specific types of businesses, then, we'll be having discussions all along.
But I just don't want to get any questions like, what color the building's gonna be?
And before I go, I do have a couple things I'll just leave you on the table. No self-respecting sales and marketing guy doesn't have swag. So we got we had.
You don't have a train hat?
You want to be a conductor now? Charlie had, huh?
Way back in my back to Rooster days, that was one of our most popular things we had in a little gift shop. It was that old classic. The train whistle.
Hey, Jim, hat number 1 goes right there.
Set that one over here. So that Pan Am Railways map is the old Pan Am Railways map. We have specific ones now for just our footprint, for the Pan Am Southern operated by the First Minister. I think there's enough there for everybody. Then
I didn't wear my hat tonight, Providence. Were those shipped in the rail line?
What's that?
Were those shipped on a rail line? Oh,
Well, that's a good point, is some things are perfectly suited to move by rail. There's some things that are perfectly suited to move by truck. I mean, everybody has a role, everybody has a part to play.
Not being good on that.
And then some B&E pens, which some of the best pens you'll ever write.
Well, Dorothy likes pens. She likes pens.
One of the best pens you'll ever write.
Oh, well,
What if this is-
I'll ask you
Hey,
next
Pete,
time I'm back here.
What if it's something Amazon would
There, you
take?
can have this one if you want.
What?
Amazon, would they take advantage of this?
Maybe.
Amazon only ships.
We have inquiries into.
Amazon doesn't use freight rail, they use intermodal. So it comes into like West Springfield or Air and they truck it. They don't use freight rail.
It wouldn't come in here.
Really?
Same exact call.
I do
My
golf.
email address is on my card, if you have general rail questions, happy to answer them. And we'll see each other again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Hey, if this goes as fast as that building on North Main, that thing went up fast and it's good.
We're finished June 13th.
Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Mayor.
Please.
Good to see
All
you.
right, Rocky.
You might want to ask for newspaper.
Yeah, that is-
We'll be open, I think the second week of July.
Wow, nice.
It's only a waiting list.
Yeah, that's what I heard. They've taken, I think,
Thank you,
30
dear.
30 to-
They're nice people. Really?
There's a map that's there for you.
Yeah.
I can't throw everything. I like my hats.
Yeah, we met them in a, I know, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna break right now.
You didn't say how come I wasn't wearing a hat?
I don't think we'll do that.
Already had a waiting, they used to work it.
Yeah.
I just take a quick picture.
Oh, it's a good fit, too.
What you should really do is get the other one. This is the old one. Get one of those.
Oh, that's,
Yeah,
oh, yeah, perfect.
that's what you want.
Okay, thank you, yeah. Oh, I know.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, long time no see. How you doing? Oh, you're- Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Yeah, ribbon cutting. Okay.
Oh, I should have passed them out, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
They're
yeah.
my
I was
stuff.
there. Yeah,
But she does take care of Democrats.
Okay.
Hey, I'm bipartisan.
Okay.
I don't do it.
Just 'cause I know my. So hopefully, Sean, we can back 5 minutes.
I stand in it though.
I mean, we have. Photographers. Yes. We're just sure this project.
Very nice.
Or lost this one, but that one.
Let's get this done by next week.
I don't.
Yeah, I have ceilings in my.
Andreas, you can have that if you want.
Oh, I have an extra one actually.
Oh, okay, all right.
Thank you though.
We're gonna go to executive session,
Oh, yeah.
but we're not gonna, I don't think we're gonna do any, we're not gonna vote on it.
Okay, no worries.
So Rocky,
Yes, sir.
Different
let's do a motion for executive session. And let me ask
I
this,
have to, check them.
should we invite Marcello in?
If we have to.
Well, he can't come in unless we do.
Well, it's an intern. Well, he needs to understand.
Lift our seal.
Okay.
And now you say anything, we put you 10 feet under.
Now? Motion to recess to executive session at 8:16 PM for discussion on the following. Real estate industrial park, section 3, phase 2, freight rail, parcel B Penrose, and pending litigation, inviting in Marcelo Pranacchio.
Second the motion.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, 37. Get that? And we'll go to Rocky.
Make a motion to adjourn the special meeting at 8:38.
I second.
Any discussion? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned.